What is the next move? That is exactly what we will discuss in this video, and at the very end we will specifically recommend the stocks and the specific strategies that you could utilize. Now, what do you think happens after the United States exhausts both fiscal and monetary policies that are typically used to improve the economy? So when taxes cannot be lowered any lower, and the interest rates are already trading at historic lows, and now we find out that the Federal Reserve is afraid to raise them a measly quarter point. What do you think is the next move? In other words, when the country has used all of the conventional tools to support and sustain economic growth and still has very difficult time to get any traction after the 10 years of ridiculous over-stimulus, and the market is on the verge of a collapse. What is the only answer at this point? Unfortunately, the only answer is war. Now, here's a quick question. Do you know how many wars is the United States currently fighting? As a United States citizen, you should know where your tax payments are going after all and how they're being used. So, do you know the answer to this question? If you have an approximate answer, please be honest. If you think it's one war, just type it in the comments before we're actually going to give you the answer. It's one war. If it's zero, type in zero. Whatever you think is the honest answer to this question is, please type it in the comments before I move to the next slide. Here's the answer. 11. Not one, 11 wars. Here's the list of wars the United States is currently conducting. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Congo, Sudan, Libya, Ukraine, Nigeria, Somalia, Yemen. Guys, that's a lot of wars. But here's an interesting fact. None of these wars were authorized by United States Congress. Whether you like it or not, our country of USA does billions in sales and profits from selling arms to other countries. Civil wars are bad for the economy. Now, external wars are great for one's economy and are a part of the United States history dating back to World War I, when it was supplying arms to everyone and it was able to grow the economy in such a way all the way into the roaring 1920s. Now, think about it. What got the United States out of the years of the Great Recession and Depression in the 1930s? It was the World War II. Here's the problem. There is a bigger war on the horizon that could exceed all other 11 wars combined. And it could break out at any moment.
There's going to be another big crash, only this time there won't be any putting it back together. It's beyond the central banks to do it.
And you're saying that sets the stage for
war. The war is the one thing. What pulled everybody out of the 30s was a global war. And I suspect what's going to happen here, because war is a huge distraction and takes people's minds off finding the guilty parties for the theft. So if we have a good war, we don't see the thieving going on here. It's like good magic. Good magic is called sleight of hand. And that's what we're dealing with politically, geopolitically, and money-wise. This is the sleight of hand to keep your attention while meanwhile I'm stealing the money out of your pocket here.
The message of war has become self-evident by the current administration. All you had to do was read between the lines. The next move to impact markets globally and markets here in the United States is the war that the current administration has been planning for the last couple of years. Now, here are the facts. Do you remember January and February 2018? What do you remember when you were turning on the TV? What do you remember? Everything that they were talking about was focused around the tax cuts, how great Trump administration was by lowering the corporate tax rate. Now, it created so much noise that some of the other things, unbelievable things that were taking place, got completely, almost unacknowledged. So here's what no one was actually paying attention to. Or maybe some people were, but certainly it didn't get the attention in the public media that it really deserved. The record-breaking military budget increase ever in the history of the United States was approved in February 2018. $760 billion. Now that is more than Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and Europe combined.
I am sending Congress a budget that rebuilds the military, eliminates the defense sequester, and calls for one of the largest increases in national defense spending in American history. National Defense Authorization Act is the most significant investment in our military and our warfighters in modern history.
Now, the budget increase was utilized on nuclear weapon production, which was a violation of the INF Treaty that has been in existence for over 3 decades. But nobody made a big deal about it. And if you read between the lines, this was the time, almost now 11, 12 months ago, when the United States clearly made the decision to go to war. But not like the miniature wars that are going on in 11 simultaneous places right now. I'm talking about a huge war. A war that's been on everybody's mind since the Cold War. Here's what I mean. Conveniently, as with everything else United States does when it comes to foreign policies and affairs, including domestic affairs, it finds someone else to blame for its own violation of the treaty. Now, who do you think they blamed again? Who do you think United States is blaming? Well, that's pretty easy to figure out. Who have we been blaming for all of our problems in the last 10 years? The answer is pretty clear. Well, Russia, of course. I mean, who did we blame on the election? Russia. Who have we been blaming for all of our problems here in the United States? Well, the culprit is Russia. Now, unless one is reading United States-made history books at school, the strategy of United States initiating each war has been very consistent, very obvious, dating all the way back to 1898. USS Maine. Portrayed on this picture is the bay in Cuba where USS Maine has been parked for over 3 months with a specific mission. 1898, Guantanamo Bay, U.S. sends USS Maine to Cuba, where it is peacefully parked for roughly 3 months till the time is right and it blows up mysteriously. Now, who does the United States blame? Of course, it blames Spain, because it is in the United States' interest to blame Spain at the moment and try to initiate the war. Now, it clearly provides no evidence that it is Spain that have destroyed the vessel. And despite Spain denying all the allegations, United States declares the war on Spain. Fast forward to August 2nd, 1964. This time, 2 USS military destroyer ships peacefully gliding near the coast of Vietnam. Even though USS Maddox fired first, they claimed it was in self-defense. Now here's the picture of USS Maddox. Notice this number right here. It is 377 feet long. And you'll understand the importance of that in just a moment. According to United States, 7 Vietnamese boats fired 22 torpedoes at USS Maddox. To no surprise, no evidence was provided that Vietnamese were ever a threat. USS Maddox didn't have a single scratch. Now, considering its length of 377 feet, it is an absolute miracle that it didn't get hit by a single torpedo. War in Vietnam was officially declared within hours after this. And surprise, surprise, we already had other destroyers waiting in the area as if they've been already there, just waiting for the right signal.
The date, August 4th, 1964. But August 4th is important whether you remember the date or not. It was on that date in the Gulf of Tonkin off the coast of North Vietnam that the American war in Vietnam really began. And the incident that began it has become as controversial as the war itself. The U.S. destroyers Maddox and Turner Joy were attacked by communist torpedo boats. Or were they? It's now 6 years and 7 months since the Tonkin incident and the Tonkin resolution. The incident produced the resolution, and the resolution was quite simple. It gave the president the right to protect American troops in Vietnam with whatever means he felt necessary, the power to prevent further aggression by North Vietnam, and to prevent South Vietnam from falling to the communists. Few people at the time thought it would take more than 6 years and almost 45,000 dead Americans and more to achieve those ends. Boys who were 12 years old that August died last week in Vietnam. Let's go back to August 4th and the U.S. destroyers Maddox and Turner Joy and try to find out what happened that night in the Gulf of Tonkin. In July of 1964, units of the 7th Fleet were patrolling the South China Sea off the coast of Vietnam. The United States was not at war with North Vietnam, but it was helping South Vietnam with massive economic and military aid. Then, this is what happened, according to the Pentagon's official reenactment narrated by Chet Huntley. On August 2nd, the United States Navy destroyer Maddox, on patrol in international waters of the Gulf of Tonkin, begins to track 3 unknown craft approaching from the northwest. They are identified as North Vietnamese PT boats, armed with torpedoes and 37mm guns. When warnings from the Maddox fail to stop the oncoming PT boats, she opens fire. The Maddox, joined by the destroyer Sea Turner Joy, resumes its routine patrol. But the next night, the men on watch in the 2 destroyers once again detect unidentified contacts on radar. The attack by the North Vietnamese boats is renewed. After a 3-hour running battle, in which 2 of the PT boats are sunk, the attackers break contact. There was no argument about the first fight. Sunday afternoon, August 2nd. It happened. The Maddox against 3 North Vietnamese PT boats. Something like this painting that hangs in the Maddox wardroom. The North Vietnamese said the Maddox invaded their waters, and they chased her out. The United States said the Maddox was in neutral waters, that although the Maddox fired first, it was in self-defense, when the North Vietnamese PT boats were about to attack. We're fairly sure all 3 PT boats were hit, and none of the torpedoes hit the Maddox. But the Maddox very likely was hit. There was a bullet hole up there in the aft gun director. It was repaired later and painted over. No sign of it today. But 2 nights later, the night of the controversial battle, the Maddox did not take any damage or suffer any losses, which is but one of many reasons why Senate investigators now believe there never was any battle that night. The Maddox and Turner Joy reported they were ambushed at the beginning of the evening by perhaps 5 or 6 torpedo boats. But that wound down by midnight to perhaps 1 boat with 2 torpedoes. And yet the destroyers reported a total of 22 torpedoes fired at them. They were doing a lot of firing themselves. Some people say they were firing at phantoms. The North Vietnamese always said they were never there, that it was simply an excuse to get into the war. The officer in charge of the destroyer division, which included the Maddox and the Turner Joy, was on board the Maddox that night. He's Captain John Herrick, Annapolis, 1943, still on active duty. We asked him to return to the Maddox, now a training ship, and recall the confusing events of August 4th, 1964.
Well, I think the uncertainty is due to the fact that it was night, it was dark, and we didn't really eyeball these boats. We did have witnesses, eyeball witnesses on the Turner Joy. I consider them dependable witnesses. However, there are people that still doubt that what they saw was boats. I do not. We had sensors who sighted the boats on radar. We had sonar that picked up noise spokes in the water. We had visual sightings. I think the preponderance of evidence, any judge in a courtroom would have to accept our witness evidence and our sensor evidence, radar and sonar, and the only conclusion a logical man could reach was that we were attacked.
Just above the bridge of the Maddox, where Captain Herrick was, is the main gun director. And inside the director was the sailor who was in charge of firing those powerful 5-inch guns. His job was to open fire once the enemy targets were spotted on radar or sonar. Those are the main methods for detecting targets you can't see directly. The man in charge of the main gun director, August 4th, 1964, was a 4-year veteran. He was also an expert sonar man, Patrick Park. Park is now a businessman in Los Angeles.
Tell me, do you think that night, August 4th, in the pitch black, in a heavy swell, rainstorms, was there anything to shoot at up there?
No, I don't. I'm certain that there was not anything to shoot at right from the beginning. The captain asked me immediately after the attack to go down and evaluate all the recordings that had been made of noise that sonar was reporting. And I kept myself pretty busy for the next 3 days, really, trying to evaluate these things and determine if we had heard anything that might have been even a question mark, that it might have been a torpedo or anything else in the water not related to the 2 ships or noise of either one of them.
And then what was your evaluation?
Absolutely nothing.
Too many examples in the United States history where we have actually initiated the conflict by masquerading it, that we were initially attacked. Now take a look at a couple of quick examples to further understand the current situation. When the war in Iraq was announced, Saddam Hussein was the villain. He was portrayed as the person that could have destroyed the world. And after the invasion and destruction of the country and thousands and hundreds of thousands of innocent people, there were no nuclear weapons found. In other words, yet again, there was no evidence. Now, in the process, United States trained hundreds of thousands of local forces, which later became known as ISIS. Now, this is not the first time United States actually went into a foreign country and has trained local troops, which later ended up being a rebel force against the United States itself. War in Syria, 2018. United States uses 59 Tomahawk missiles in a strike against Syria. Now, coincidentally, there was no evidence that any chemical weapons were used by Syria. Surprisingly, United States conducts the attack within hours before an independent UN committee arrives there to discover the evidence of chemical weapons. But why did the United States launch the 59 missiles in such a rush? Well, the answer is quite obvious. It is to destroy the only real evidence. And the evidence would have shown that there was no chemical weapons used, just like there was no nuclear weapons that were owned by Saddam Hussein regime. Fast forward to the present day. Such a provocation of targeting 59 missiles at Syria was actually aimed at engaging Russia into war. But Russia did not respond. Therefore, United States has failed at that particular provocation, and it had to move to Plan B. Now, Plan B, stunningly, resembles the plan used on August 1964. Now, this time, U.S. vessels, actually portrayed as Ukrainian vessels, yes, 2 Ukrainian vessels, surprise, given to Ukraine by the United States, has illegally entered Russian border territory despite warnings not to do so. Now, if Russians fired, the provocation would have been successful and the war with Russia would have been declared. Now, interestingly, this provocation takes place literally just a day before the big trade meeting in Argentina. Now, instead of firing, which Russia had all the rights to do, Instead of opening fire, they captured the vessels and captured the evidence that Ukrainian boats entered the borders illegally. Now, I don't know, but for such a country that is often being portrayed as the aggressor, that is definitely not the behavior of the aggressor. They had all the rights to destroy those ships, but they did not. Now, consider some other food for thought. Russia actually has only 13 bases, military bases, outside of its country. How does that actually compare to the 800 military bases that the United States has all over the world? The United States actually signed a treaty to denuclearize some of the weapons with Russia. Russia has actually fulfilled what they were supposed to do, but the United States postponed their denuclearization efforts to destroy those weapons till 2023. Now, what a coincidence. After the second provocation, the Plan B fails. This is what we find out. The United States openly declares that we'll pull out of the treaty, which every nation in the world considers a threat to their well-being.
5,500 kilometers is the same distance as Lisboa to the Ural Mountains, or Vienna to Delhi. That's the maximum range of the missiles banned under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the one that Gorbachev and Reagan signed in 1987, generally ending the Cold War, the one that Trump intends to quit.
We're going to terminate the agreement. We're going to pull out the agreement. We're going to pull out. We're going to terminate the agreement. We're going to pull out.
The one that's provided Europe's security.
Der USA, wir sehen im INF-Vertrag und ein Element, das in besonderer Weise auch den europäischen Interessen, also auch
and the withdrawal of which is
really bad thing.
Simply crazy.
A terrible idea.
If the US suspends its obligations, it will be able to deploy short and medium-range missiles in Europe, and Russia will have to respond.
Мы против разрушения этого договора. Но если это произойдет, соответствующим образом реагируем.
And every single European city or town will be within reach of dozens of rockets from both sides all the time.
I hope you were able to read between the lines and follow this so far. What this really states is the fact the announcement to pull out of these INF treaty was made just 3 days ago. The reason to pull out of the treaty was stated, again, blaming Russia. However, the budget for developing those missiles that are prohibited in the treaty was authorized and approved almost a year ago. As you can probably hear from the sound of my voice, I am completely against any war because it is highly destructive and many innocent people die worldwide as a result of any war, and unfortunately this war will be no exception. Now, Wall Street has been on the sidelines, reading between the lines, but it is no longer just taking a notice. This time it is actually taking action because the signs can no longer be ignored. The war is imminent. What further evidence could one need when all the big money, all the institutional investors' money starts pouring where? Where do you think the money's been going all day today, especially in the morning? The contrast has been so powerful when the markets were dropping 500 points early in the morning today on December 10th, 2018. Where were the institutional investors pouring their money? I'll give you the answer in just a second. Wall Street, institutional investors could not ignore the signs of war any longer. Even when markets were dropping like a rock, they were buying defense stocks like never before. Now, there was one other sector that institutions were buying on heavy volume as well. Now, guess what sector it was? I'll give you a hint. What is typically used universally as a form of payment at times of war? And no, it's not Bitcoin. It is gold. Here's a snapshot of what institutional investors were buying today on heavier than normal volume. The shares of Goldcorp, the shares of Rheingold, which both of these have been on a substantial rally over the last week. General Dynamics, Defense, Lockheed Martin, NOC, which is Northrop Grumman. Okay, all of these defense stocks were majorly in the green as the rest of the market was falling, I think it is quite apparent that Wall Street finally got the message that United States actually sent between the lines when they announced the biggest military spending ever in the history of the United States a year ago. But I think Wall Street is just finally catching on to the message, and this is just the beginning. So here are the key takeaways. While the market is falling, two sectors stand out on the bull side. So what do? Buy gold in form of buying gold futures, buying gold call options, buying gold stocks and physical gold. Second, buy LMT calls, GD calls, and NOC calls. Short everything else, protect your family, and unfortunately, get ready for war. And if you have any further questions, schedule a 20-minute trading options session by clicking the links below and ask any questions about trading stocks and options that could help you regardless of these scary circumstances. Make the most for yourself and your family through trading the markets and particularly trading options. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.